Emergency Services FM with Jay Dartmoor on Smooth Radio. I don't know. I've had a little bit too much coffee this morning, as normally is the problem with me. Oh, how I cannot cope without being extremely caffeinated. So, I'm flying solo today. I don't have any guests on. I like doing solo episodes every now and then, and I like playing around a little bit with the production too. But as you may have noticed, if you're watching this, then you will see that the camera angle is slightly differently. It captures the different side of my face, and also shows some cool little things in the background. So yeah, I'm just gonna play around a little bit, I think, with some various things what I'm doing. So this week, like I said, I'm flying solo, but that does not mean that the episode will be any less incredible, fun, amazing, and filled with joy. So we've got some funny stories, which we're going to get into. We've got a voice note from somebody, which I think will be quite fun, which I think you'll quite enjoy. Quite an interesting story relating to somebody who was tasered and it had unintended consequences, let's put it that way. And then the officer who sent me through the voice note then had to deal with said unintended consequences. We have one of my own personal stories, which is one of my favourite stories, and I don't think I've actually told it on this podcast before. It's in my book, but I don't think I've told it on this podcast. And I actually have quite a big announcement to make too. Quite a big announcement, which I think certainly emergency service workers and shift workers will be pretty happy about. So without further ado, let's get into the story of the week. And there's a few things I want to talk about with this. So the story of the week is the awful incident which occurred recently. And we can't talk too much about it because it's still an ongoing case, but we can mention it. We can maybe give our opinion on it, assuming I don't get cancelled by the news organisation, which, I've already done a counter narrative to the BBC Panorama documentary by having one of the officers on. More on that later. However, I want to talk about the incident what happened recently where the Palestine Action Brigade broke into a secure, I don't know what it was like a secure building, a lock-up, something like that. And they have then caused absolute mayhem. The police have been called. And then they've gone at cops with a sledgehammer. Now, to me, that's fucking disgusting. And one person in particular, one of the suspects, is alleged to have struck the officer with a sledgehammer to the back. They've been charged with GBH, a Section 18. For me, hitting somebody with a sledgehammer is a bit more than GBH. For me, that's attempted murder. And I remember having this discussion with somebody, and it's actually quite difficult to prove attempted murder. Murder is easier to prove because you have a dead person. And you just have to prove the intent or they wanted to inflict grievous bodily harm. With attempt murder, though, it's you've got somebody who's alive, perhaps seriously injured, but you have to prove the intent there to try and kill them. And that's a bit more difficult. Detectives and people that I've spoken to in major crime and officers around the country have all really confirmed this. So that would make sense why they've gone with the GBH charge, because, okay, we don't have to prove intent to kill there. We can just show through recklessness or through your actions or the intention there, you intended to cause grievous bodily harm to that person, which hitting somebody with a sledgehammer would likely do that. It's not going to tickle them. And one thing I found with the footage what I saw circulating on X is one of the bobbies grabbed hold of one of the Palestine Action people, they tased them, put them to the floor, and the whiny little cretin started going, oh, you don't have to handcuff me, you don't legally have to handcuff me, oh, you're leaning on me, oh, that hurts. Listen, you silly person, you've just gone at people with sledgehammers. You have now given up all of your rights to courtesy. If you'd have stood there and put your hands up and gone, you know what, yeah, all right, I've been a bit of a dickhead, please, I'm really sorry. Maybe then the officers may have, if there was no mention of any weapons at all, maybe the officers may have been a bit more courteous. But frankly, it just shows that absolute entitlement to me, that they believe that they can do this, They can believe they can cause these sorts of problems. Super quick interruption. Won't take more than 10 seconds, promise you. If you are in the emergency services and you're feeling very burnt out, you're feeling very stressed, you're sick of management, and you also really struggle sleeping on night shifts, then check out my Shift Survivor Guide, completely free. You can get it in a link in the video description, or you can scan this QR code right here. Thank you. And then they expect the courtesy of the officers to treat them um, with what's the word, with kid gloves. It's like, no, you're gonna get tasered. I don't care if I'm hurting you. You're going in handcuffs. I don't care how much you cry and complain. You're going in handcuffs. And I saw another video where an officer was actually fighting with one of the suspects with who was alleged to have hit the officer with a sledgehammer. When it comes to activism, I'm all for peaceful activism. I'm all for standing up for something you believe in, peaceful protests, etc. But when you cross that threshold into criminality, where you're damaging things which people, you're damaging people's work, you're impacting people's lives, you're potentially traumatizing people as well through your actions. And then as a result of that, police officers, emergency service workers who are ordinary members of the public then get seriously injured trying to stop you doing what you're doing. And it's not even the case that they get seriously injured during a fracas or during a melee or someone throws something, this is somebody they brought a weapon, prior to a heavy-handed weapon, and they have alleged to have used it on somebody else. That to me is indefensible and utterly reprehensible, and that should not happen. So I hope that the people who are alleged get I hope justice is served, let's put it that way. And I hope if justice is served, that the gravity of what they have done reflects it in the sentencing. I hope the courts realize that police officers don't go to work to be assaulted, and they certainly don't go to work with potential irrevocable life-changing injuries. And I just want to put it out there to those bobbies that turned up to that incident. You did not deserve what happened. It was absolutely awful. I thought you were brilliant from the footage I've seen. Under the stress of that situation, I thought you were absolutely incredible with how you handled that. And there would be people sat in their comfy homes, in their nice comfy armchairs, sitting there going, "Oh, I would have done that differently." Like, you have probably never been in any kind of situation like that. It's very easy to criticize people who shoes you'll never walk in. My advice to those people is always, if you think you can do a better job, then sign up as a volunteer, stick on a stab vest and get out there on a Friday night and just see how cool you keep your head when there is somebody 6'2", coked off their tits on cocaine, and they're trying to rearrange your insides. That's what I would say to them. But when it comes to activism, like I said, I'm all for people wanting to do something which for a cause what they believe in. When it comes to activism, there's a line which people can't cross, and it seems like nowadays a lot of groups are crossing this line. But with activism, it's like they convince themselves that because what they're standing up for is so horrendous, then that justifies them doing what they do. And it becomes that difference between someone who believes in something because they believe it's wrong, and then someone who becomes a bit of a fundamentalist, which is why Palestine Action has been prescribed a terrorist group, because of the actions of the people who do that. And all it does is when you commit acts like this, it actually detracts from your message. It takes away from the message of what you're trying to say, because people are not talking about what's happening in Gaza as a result of what you've done. People are now talking about how reprehensible and despicable the actions are, what you've done. So it detracts from the message. It's like the Just Stop Oil people, where I think it was them, or Extinction Rebellion, one of the climate activist groups as well, where they blocked a motorway. They sat down and blocked a motorway. As a result of that, not even talking about the disruption to people's lives, but I believe there were ambulances what couldn't get through. And I believe there was an urgent 999 call where I think someone had had a stroke. This is what I think I've seen on the news. But as a result of that, this person with a stroke was permanently disabled because they couldn't get an ambulance to them in time. That detracts from the message. Their message may be valiant, it may be admirable, it may be a very important cause what they're standing up for. But if your actions verge and breach that line of what is socially acceptable or not, you detract from your message. Like I say, I'm all for people being activists and stand for something believing, but there's a line you can't cross. And when you go too far over that line, you might say, "Yeah, but now everyone's talking about us." Yeah, that's right. Everyone's talking about you. not your cause. Everyone's talking about you. So just something to bear in mind. The next thing I wanted to talk about is I'm going to get quite a bit of crap. And probably by the time this podcast goes out, well, this episode, this interview I did will be aired. So we will see what the response is. I've already had some people, one person in particular, I won't mention them, won't mention their name because I don't want to give them any more limelight than they currently have. They have made a video about me off the back of me platforming, me interviewing one of the officers that was sacked as part of the BBC Panorama. That was an officer called Martin Borg. You may remember him as the officer who took the journalist out on a ride along, the one who is alleged to have made racist comments in the pub. He wears a leather jacket, dark hair. That's the guy. Martin actually reached out to me, and because I made some content in relation to the panorama, taking the mick out of it, doing a bit of a skit, Martin actually reached out to me and said, I was actually one of the officers that was investigated on that. And I thought, well, what a great opportunity to get a bit of inside knowledge and a counter narrative to the BBC Panorama documentary. Because what I find very interesting is that the BBC, we know that the media lie. I believe at the time of recording this, the BBC are currently being sued by Donald Trump because they have doctored footage against him. So we are all happy to condemn the BBC and the mainstream media and say that they lie and they put forward narratives which aren't true to fit their own agenda for whatever reason, whatever agenda that may be. And yet, when I want to speak to one of the officers that has been shown to act in a certain light, I'm the bad one. It's like in one vein, we want to talk about the BBC and how disgusting they are and what they do is unethical and wrong. But then if somebody wants to get an insider perspective with some nuance and some context, I'm the bad one. It's like, surely, can both things be true at the same time? Is that a bit hypocritical? Is it because we're platforming a former police officer and people, as the BBC puts forward, don't like the police? And I also find it quite ironic that when these news companies or these people do make these kind of content, slamming the police and doxing the police and everything else, they do it only because the people they are criticizing allows them the freedom and the safety to be able to do that. So there's always that food for thought. My interview with Martin was quite interesting, and I like to think I challenged him appropriately. I potentially could have challenged him more in certain areas on certain questions, but I'm not perfect and I'm still learning. So I would like to think that I did a decent enough job in my interview with him. I also tried to stay as neutral as possible because I didn't want to come across as too confrontational in that interview. Otherwise, he may shut down and he may not want to speak to me. So I had to do a delicate balance, really, of allowing him to say what he wanted to say, but also challenging him appropriately over what he's alleged to have done and the comments he has made. People will have their own opinion about that interview. People will have their own opinion about me and will have their own opinion about the Panorama documentary in general. And that's fine. Everybody is entitled to their own opinion. I just don't like living in a world where cancel culture is a thing. I don't like, and I put something on X recently, and it was if somebody you despise is talking about a topic you find utterly reprehensible, would you listen to what they had to say? And it was about 50-50, but I would say a more slightly leniency towards the no, which is quite worrying because I believe that there is a world for nuance. And certainly as an ex investigator, I want to hear both sides. Because, of course, in police work, if one person says something, you can't just take that at face value, be that a victim or a perpetrator, be that somebody's allegation or the defense of that allegation. You have to look at both sides and you have to form a evidence bundle. You have to find out what has really gone on through questioning, through looking deeper. When I watched that Panorama documentary, I could tell straight away that they were not getting a full picture here, which is why I wanted to, when Martin reached out, I thought it was important to interview him. Do I agree with everything he said? And do I agree that there are circumstances in which no one should say the things he did? And do I also agree that there are circumstances where someone can say something and then that footage be doctored to portray them in a certain light? Yeah, I do. But I like I like thinking that I'm relatively open-minded. And I believe that people should have the right to explain themselves if we are accusing them of something terrible. So Martin has been accused of being Islamophobic, of being racist. So I wanted to ask him about that. Does the fact that I've asked him about that make me culpable with what he said? Does it make me just as bad as him for having him on? Some people would say yes, guilty by association. Some people would say no. But I was actually speaking to a partner about this, and I said, I was getting a bit of heat for it. And I thought, should I publish this interview or not? And we had a bit of a back and forth. And then I came to the conclusion, well, people are going to have their opinion regardless. And now that I've put it out there that I have interviewed this person, if I then don't publish the interview, that makes me look weak. It also means that Martin doesn't get to explain himself. And it also means that the people who want to punish you for having a particular point of view or for having somebody on who they don't agree with, they win. And it means that the advocacy and the people who I stand up for, the emergency services, who don't have a voice, can't look to me as somebody who, regardless of what flack or backlash I may get for something, for a video or an interview, they feel unheard. So, and it's the whole thing with apologizing. When you see somebody online, they maybe say something or they find someone finds a tweet from 10 years ago. They they then apologize. I'm really sorry, I shouldn't have said that because of the heat they get. Now, when that happens, we never see the people who come after them say, okay, that's fine, he's apologized, never mind, we'll leave him alone. No, if anything, they actually go harder at them because they've basically been validated and exonerated and vindicated to say that, well, great, we knew you was this. Now we're going to come at you harder because you just admitted to it. This video was sponsored by my best-selling police memoir, The Job's Fuck Secret Diary of a Police Officer. After 10 years in the police service, I finally left and I decided I need to speak out. This book does a deep dive into police corruption, the real reason why the police force is falling apart, and things you will never hear in the mainstream media. You can check it out in the link in the description of this video. You could also grab some merchandise and support me on Patreon. And now, without further ado, enjoy the video. So the cancellation mob, will only push harder. And the people who potentially agreed with you or stood up for you will then feel that they've been lied to. They'll feel that because you've apologized, you've now turned your back on us. So by apologizing for something that you've said or a point or a belief that you have, or something which you did, which you believe was right, and then have reversed and done a U-turn, that actually makes you look worse all across the board. So I think that'll be interesting. Being interesting to see what happens. And the next time I do this podcast, I will do maybe a bit of a deeper dive into the comments in total, in general, and give my opinion on them. A little announcement too, because we like announcements on this show, is I've been chatting to a very large UK police humour, don't want to say who, a very large police humour page, and potentially we're going to collaborate to do some kind of Christmas special. So it'll be like a Q&A sort of thing, which I think would be dead groovy. Another big announcement what I've got, and this is the main thing I wanted to say on this episode, is I'm actually starting my own community. It'll be a support community. A support community where we do talk about diet, exercise, and fitness, but we also talk about mental health. We talk about PTSD. It's not going to be a place where if you're under investigation, you can rant about it. We don't want that. Okay, this is going to be a positive place, a place of support and community. There's going to be seminars on there where I'm going to be doing calls, live calls with people. There's going to be, I'm going to try and get people in to do interviews. I'm going to try and get people from occupational health, occupational therapy, personal trainers, etc. I don't want it to just be another ex-cop turns PT kind of page, kind of community, because we've got 100 of those. We've got tons of those. I want this to be something particularly unique. And equally in that, one thing I can talk about is what happens when you leave the job? What happens when you need to get another job? How to build a business, how to build an online business like I've been able to do. Because one thing what keeps people stuck in a career they don't like is one, fear. They don't know what they could do outside of the job. And two, salary is another one. I earn 40 grand a year on this. How could I earn 40 grand a year outside of doing this? Security is another one. I know what I get every month. I know I get a paycheck and information. I want to start a new business. I want to be my own boss and do my own thing, but I don't know where to start. All that will be covered inside this platform. I'm very excited to start launching it. It's active currently. It's a fairly new community right now. I haven't officially launched it, but it is active. So if you like the sound of this community, you want to get in early, then there'll be a link to it in the description of this video. So, hey, always bringing good stuff. All right. So let's move on to something pretty cool. And those pretty cool things are. So we got a bit of a good news story, okay? So I had a bit of a Google before I came on here because we had too many dark and awful and terrible things. But there's a really nice good news. Yeah. But there's a really nice good news story here. And this is an ambulance story. And it's West Mids Ambulance Service ups staffing ahead of winter surge. So we know that winter is a particular time of volatility for vulnerable people. It's a time where people get more sick, people get more ill, people get more lonely, people's mental health begins to decline due to the lack of sunlight and cold and social isolation. And cold and social isolation. So I'm really happy to hear that. So the service has now taken on more than 158 additional staff, including student paramedics, to bolster capacity through the winter months. The extra staff are meant to help weather what's being described as a perfect storm of demand, with winter-related illnesses, increased 999 calls, and ongoing pressure on A&E departments. That can only be a good thing, I think. More support for people. That's what we want. Now, I'm quite liberal. I believe that everybody should have access to free healthcare. And I also believe that the emergency services are the glue which holds society together. So I'm happy to say that the NHS, the West Mids Ambulance Service, are increasing their staff and capacity, which is brilliant. So let's get on to a couple of funny little stories, shall we? So, first one I'm going to talk to you about, you beautiful people, because I love the stories what you send me. I always have a good time reading them. And I'd like to say that I have them all prepared for when I join onto the podcast and I start talking about it. So, let's have a look. I might need my glasses on because I'm blind as a bat, but they're not here. And me moving away to get them would mean more editing, and editing takes time and it's pain in the ass. So, this is purely for me being lazy, so I do apologize. So, this was sent in from an officer, and I haven't actually read through this yet. All I know is the context of what they've said. Okay, so here we go. So this was about 10 years ago on a late shift and get called to a suspicious circumstances call. Call comes in from a male's partner, also male, to say he's been talking to his partner and he suddenly stopped talking and can hear some strange noises. I get there and going through the back door and go upstairs to find one of the strangest sights I've ever seen while being in the police. A male who was around 40 years old, muscular, shaved head like a skinhead with tattoos. Like the sort of guy you'd expect to see demonstrating out of a hotel with asylum seekers. You might get some people's backs up there talking about that. Only he was wearing a latex mermaid tail and an army gas mask. All right, things are getting weird. He was literally dressed as a mermaid. And on the ground next to him, and on the bed next to him, he was surrounded by some of the biggest dildos and butt plugs you could imagine. I mean, massive, eye-watering size. The filter part, oh, for fuck's sake. The filter part of the gas mask he'd soaked in poppers, so he was breathing in pure poppers, and this has triggered a cardiac arrest. I started CPR and called for the ambulance. I was pretty sure he was dead at the I was pretty sure he was dead at this point, but I had to try. Anyway, ambulance arrived and confirmed death. I've never I've never had to move dildos out of the way to do CPR before. And you know, fucking hell, I need my eyes bleaching after reading that. Oh, Jesus. Why do I do this? Just find them out the way. Oh. Arse Blaster 5000 over there. Oh, fucking, we call this one Clive. We move Clive out of the way. Fuck me. That reminds me actually of a story I dealt with. It's called A Big Bag of Dicks. I fucking love this story. It's a big bag of dicks. So I was, when I was in the job, I had to go and pick up a prisoner. I had to collect a prisoner from a local force. I had to go collect a prisoner from a local force. Anyway, so we pick up this guy, call him Sean. Right? Sean's about 30, 35, something like that. Pick up Sean. Anyway, he's got a suitcase with him. And turn around to him and say, "Have you been traveling?" And he's like, "Yeah, something like that." Anyway, so we get to the station. He's a bit of a tit in the holding cell in the van, but anyway, we get to the station and he gets searched, nothing on him. While he's being booked in, answering all the questions, one of the detention officers, cracking bloke, probably in his late 60s, early 60s, something like that. An older gentleman, anyway, let's put it that way. He then has the job of going through Sean's items, Sean's suitcase. And holy mother of fuck. So I've seen people come in with interesting things before. Clothes, different bits, drugs, all sorts of stuff. But the sight of what I saw, I believe will stay with me until my dying day. But the sight of what I saw, I believe will stay with me until my dying day. Now, there is a phrase called a big bag of dicks. And a big bag of dicks is a synonym or metaphor, whatever you want to call it. English teachers, please correct me, of basically something that's bad. Okay. Oh, yesterday was a big bag of dicks. It's a big bag of dicks yesterday. Big bag of dicks. Anyway, so he unzips Sean's suitcase to find the biggest collection of dildos, butt plugs, whips, you name it. This man was a one-man traveling fuck show. Okay. And as as we're looking at him in absolute just shock of what he's been walking around with, I never knew one person could carry so many lethal weapons personally. He then turns to us and said, "Oh yeah, they're mine. I'm a male escort." Like, well, that explains the suitcase, pal. So the best part was this detention officer, he asked the sergeant, he said, "Can I just book them all in under one?" So I didn't have to go through them all. And the sergeant, whether this was necessary or not, or the sergeant was just pulling his leg and, fancied a laugh, said, "Nope, you have to go through them all one by one and bag them all individually." By the end of it, I'd say it took him about a good 5, 10 minutes to take all these out and put them in, one big bag. Um, a big bag of dicks was encountered that day. So yeah, join the police, he said. You'll see some sights. They weren't lying about that bit. Finally, there is a voice note, and I get the odd voice note, and I like voice notes because voice notes, I think, they add a bit more nuance and humor to the podcast. And that's what we're all about on here. We're all about fun stuff. Yes, we talk about serious stuff. We talk about, the dark, the crazy, and the evil, and the chaos of emergency service life. But we also talk about the funny shit. And sometimes the funny shit's awful, but yeah, kind of funny at the same time. So this one was sent from an officer, and I'll play it for you now.
When I worked Saturday night, two of my colleagues had to shout for assistance. We got there, and the guy needed taken to hospital because it had been a fail to stop. He got tasered twice, and he also shot himself whilst he'd been tasered. So I was sat in the middle of the cage when they put me in the back of the van. It was pitch black, and then they put the light on, and before me was like, the only way I could describe him was that he was an absolute fucking unit. Bald head, poked off his tits, covered in shit, covered in mud. I had to sit with him for 6 hours in the hospital and also roll around hospital with him most of the night because he was on coke and he thought that I tried to kill him. So it's not the end of the world, mate. Take care.
That is fucking horrendous, to say the least. So I then asked the officer, God, he said, yeah, he was covered in shit and his uniform was gross. He then said that he had to put his uniform. When I got home, I threw my uniform in the machine and put it on a 90-degree wash twice. I said you should have just burnt the uniform and got some new stuff. But anyway, we know what stores are like. Um, So if you ever think you're having a terrible shift, just think you could be rolling around with somebody who has defecated themselves, smeared it all over themselves, is off their tits on drugs for 6 hours. Fucking hell, that's horrendous. I shouldn't laugh. You know what? I am going to laugh because that's funny. That's horrendous, but it's funny. Oh, join the police, he said. Join the police, he said. It'll be fun, they said. I've nothing really more to say to that, other than that officer needs an absolute medal. Maybe you know how the police have like that fund, what you can, you have like through the Fed, they have a house you can go to, and you can go and relax, and have like a spa day and stuff like that. I think that officers should get that by default because dealing with that sounds absolutely horrendous. That's yeah. Thank you. But this is the shit you don't hear about. This is the stuff you don't hear about, and this is the things what people go, "Oh, that's not true. That didn't happen." No, I can. If there's any scenario in which that story existed and happened, it's more than likely in the emergency services because you deal with all kinds of absolute insanity. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, you have been amazing as always. Remember, check out the membership. See if you fancy it. See if you fancy becoming a member. Um, and yes, the link is in the description to that. And as always, if you want me to read some of your stories out, whether that's a rant, whether that's a funny story, whether it's, just getting something off your chest, whether it's some good work what you've dealt with, email me, thejobpod25@gmail.com, or send me a voice note, send me a DM on social media. I'm most active on Instagram. Links are all in the description of this video. You have been amazing. Thank you to everyone for checking this out, and thank you for everything what you do. You made the world a better place. Until next time, see you later.